Okay, hello and welcome to the Research Leaders 2025 uh, information webinar. This is focused on the newly launched Research Leaders 2025 Fellowship Programme, which is jointly funded by Chagas and the European Commission through the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions. And this is the second call of Research Leaders 2025. So throughout the webinar, you're free to submit your questions either via Twitter using the hashtag RL2025 or via email using researchleaders2025 at chagas.ie. At the end of the presentation, we will take 5 minutes just to mute the microphones and tabulate the questions, and then we'll come back and answer all of those. If we don't get to answer any of them today, we will put written answers to them up on our website in the form of a frequently asked questions document, and also all of the ones which we do answer today, with the written answers will also go up in the FAQ document. So the aim of Research Leaders 2025 is to train the next generation of research leaders in agriculture and food research and to underpin the objectives of the Foodwise 2025 strategy. So the Foodwise 2025 strategy is the Irish government's strategy for development of the agri-food sector. And in terms of training the next generation of research leaders, this fellowship program is different to a regular postdoctoral position. So in a regular postdoctoral position, the main focus, in some cases almost the exclusive focus, is to complete the research project. And while that's also a very important part of Research Leaders 2025, the other part of it is in training you and your skills to develop into the next generation of research leaders. So, as part of that, you'll join a cohort of fellows. You'll be trained to develop your leadership and management skills using training, networking with the other research leaders, and also with more established senior researchers, and also benefiting from mentoring. And we'll go into that in more detail as in the presentation. So to give you an overview of the fellowship will last 36 months. That consists of 18 months outside of Ireland and an 18-month return phase to Ireland. During that, up to 6 months of that can be an industry placement as part of an outgoing or return phase if the outgoing phase is to an academic organisation. The research topic is bottom up, so you're free to propose any research topic or any research project as long as it relates to one of the four Chagas research program areas. And they are animal and grassland research and innovation, crops, environment and land use, food, rural economy and development. The benefits, there is a gross annual salary of €51,717 for those without family allowance and €56,306 for those that do qualify for family allowance. A family allowance will be paid in case the supported fellow has family obligations, and in that context, family is defined as persons linked to the fellow by marriage or by a relationship with equivalent status to marriage recognised by the legislation of the country or region where this relationship was formalised, or by dependent children who are actually being maintained by the fellow. Uh, in addition, research costs will be paid to cover the research project, and in Chagas we find that the actual cost of a project differs significantly depending on whether it's desk-based, field-based or laboratory-based. So we've set an automatic allocation of funds to each of the projects based on that. So €300 per month for desk-based projects, €500 per month for field-based projects, and €1,250 per month for laboratory-based projects. In terms of career development, the fellow will develop a high-level career development plan before the fellowship starts. The fellow will be allocated a dedicated career mentor, and that'll be worked out between the management team and the fellow themselves. And the role of the career mentor is not to focus at all on the science, so they'll be completely separated from the scientific supervisory team. There'll be a person in a senior position in their own career who's able to meet the fellow once or twice a year and to discuss their career development plans and strategies. Uh, The fellows will also join the Chagas Management Development Programme and will participate in an annual fellows retreat where they will engage with other fellows, with already established research leaders from academia, industry and civil society organisations, with national funding agencies and with national contact points for Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. One of the uh, focus areas of this fellowship program is to address the what's known as the leaky pipeline, and that's the phenomenon whereby at early career stage in science and research we see that roughly half and half male and female division between the researchers. So we see this at PhD level and at early postdoc level. However, by the time you get to senior researchers or professors, the ratio becomes heavily skewed towards men. So we've taken proactive steps to help to ensure that this fellowship program presents equal opportunities for all genders. So applicants who have taken a career break will not be disadvantaged. Female fellows will be facilitated in finding a senior female researcher to serve as a career mentor. There will be paid maternity leave of 26 weeks and adoptive leave of 24 weeks available for female fellows. And in that case, the duration of the fellowship will be extended by the duration of the maternity or adoptive leave taken. And also the review cohorts, both the remote review cohorts and the stage 2 evaluation panel, will be gender balanced. So as I mentioned at the start, this is our second call for Research Leaders 2025. In the first call, we had a target of reaching at least 40% of the fellows from each gender, and we have reached that target. So 6 of the 10 awardees in the first call are female and 4 are male. So what about Teagasc? Well, the mission of Teagasc is the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority. Its mission is to support science-based innovation in the agri-food sector and the wider bioeconomy that will underpin profitability, competitiveness and sustainability. So Teagasc is an integrated organisation combining research, advisory and education professionals all working to achieve that mission. I mentioned FoodWise 2025 at the start of the presentation. So that's underpinning the objectives of FoodWise 2025 is an important target for this fellowship program, hence the name. And that's an important document to note when you're formulating your full application. Not at this early stage so much, but definitely when you're formulating your full application. It's also worth looking at the Teagasc Technology Foresight report, which identified 6 main areas of technology that are going to transform the agri-food sector over the coming years up to 2035. And also bear in mind that Teagasc is an applied research organisation, so we're heavily focused on achieving impact from the research. And here's just one example. Every year we publish a document describing the impact highlights that have arisen from Teagasc research over the previous year. So what are the inputs and outputs in Teagasc? Well, we have 500 scientific and technical staff. We have more than 200 hectares of experimental and teaching land, pilot scale food facilities, in addition to all of our laboratory space. Uh, and in terms of outputs, then that leads to between 2014 and 2018, 2,514 peer review publications. And when we use Insights, the Insights tool to independently compare ourselves to research performers across the EU 28 member states, if we look at number of citations, we see that Teagasc is ranked 6th for food science and technology and 4th for agriculture, dairy and animal sciences. Okay, in terms of eligibility, usually in the questions we get are often focus on eligibility, and actually we're very happy with that because um, we want to get the maximum number of applications possible. We want to get really good applications, send them for peer review evaluation, and then pick the best of those as judged by the peer review process. We do not want to rank or mark projects as ineligible, because if they're ineligible, they'll have to be withdrawn from the review process or never enter the review process. We don't want that. We really want to ensure that projects are or proposals are eligible. So I advise you, especially at this early stage, to check the eligibility criteria in the call document very closely and make sure what you're proposing is eligible. In terms of the applicants, you can submit one proposal only. The first eligible proposal that you submit will be taken, and anything submitted after that will not be accepted. Uh, you cannot be a permanent employee of any of the host organizations. You must be an experienced researcher, and that's based on the Mary Sklodowska-Curie definitions of experienced researcher, which is at a person who, at the deadline for receipt of full application, will be in possession of a doctoral degree or have at least 4 years of full-time equivalent research experience. You must have a sufficient language ability to undertake the fellowship, and bear in mind that there are two locations, or at least two locations. There's the outgoing phase and the return phase. So for the return phase in Chagask, usually the person would need to speak a level of English that allows them to interact with the other people in the laboratory and with their supervisors. And for the outgoing phase, you need to be aware of the daily used language in the laboratory or institution to which you're going, and to ensure that you have sufficient language ability to interact with the people there and to conduct your project. We'll be asking the supervisors and the host institutions to confirm that you have sufficient language ability as part of the application. So please ensure that you do before making the application, before putting time into it. In terms of nationality, the nationality requirements depend on the country of your outgoing phase. So if the outgoing phase will be conducted in a member state or associated country of Horizon 2020, you can be of any nationality. If the outgoing phase is to be conducted outside of the member states or associated countries for Horizon 2020, you must be a national or a long-term resident of a member state or associated country. And the long-term residency is defined in the call document there. You must also have the ability to live and work in the country of the host organizations, and where it is clear that that will not be possible, the application may be deemed ineligible and not go for review. If there's uncertainty about that, the application may be evaluated, but this clause will also apply as a condition of the fellowship, meaning that it may go for evaluation, but if it is selected as a successful proposal, when we come to work out a contract with you and ask you for all of your documentation, if it becomes apparent that you will not have the right to live and work in the country of the host organizations, then the fellowship will be rescinded. Um, Fellows must engage in international mobility, so you must not have resided or carried out your main activity in the country where the first 18 months of the fellowship will take place for more than 12 months in the last 3 years. And if you're including a secondment as part of the outgoing phase, then that applies to that country also. In terms of supervisors and hosts, the outgoing phase host may be at an academic or non-academic organization. The secondment is allowed if the outgoing phase host is an academic organization, but then the secondment must be to a non-academic organization. And during the outgoing phase, the secondment host must be outside of Ireland, and during the return phase, the secondment host must be in a member state or associated country, and that could include Ireland. This, we expect a three-member supervisory team, so the primary supervisor will be based in Chagask, and this supervisor will provide supervision and support throughout the full 36 months of the fellowship. The outgoing phase supervisor will provide day-to-day on-the-ground supervision and support during the outgoing phase, and also continue to contribute to the supervisory team afterwards. And then there's a third member of the supervisory team. So where you're undertaking a secondment, then the secondment supervisor will be an appropriate member of that team. Where you're not undertaking a secondment, then you can look at bringing in other expertise. So that could be from a complementary discipline or from a non-academic sector. So again, if you're not undertaking a secondment, then the choice of the third member of the supervisory team is totally with you, but it will also be evaluated as part of the evaluation criteria in terms of overall supervision available to the fellow. Um, Supervisors can be a supervisor for more than one application, um, but in that they should bear in mind their own resources and their own ability to give support to more than one application if more than one application was successful. The supervisors must also have a contract to cover the relevant portion of the fellowship. So the outgoing phase supervisor must have a contract to at least the end of the outgoing phase. The Chagask primary supervisor must have a contract which will last until at least the end of the entire fellowship. And if there is a secondment, then the secondment supervisor must have a contract which will last until the end of the secondment. So and in terms of the outgoing phase supervisor and secondment supervisor, that will have to be detailed in the letter of support from the host institution also. In terms of content, the application must relate to at least one of the Chagas program areas. It must be consistent with the expression of interest. It must comply with ethical principles, including the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, and specific areas regarding human cloning, human genetic modification, and creation of human embryos for research are not allowed. In any case, we wouldn't generally expect to receive those in Chagask, but if you are considering it, it's worth noting. The application must cover 36 months. The expression of interest and the full application must be received by the deadline. The application must be complete and in English. The data related to eligibility must be consistent. So what I mean by this is that there is the data related to your place of work and the time that you received your PhD will be covered in part A of the form, but that data should also be consistent with the information in your CV. If there's inconsistencies there, then it may be ruled ineligible. The application should be submitted as PDF files and should comply with the call documents and templates. And obviously, there should be no attempt to influence the review process by either yourself or your supervisors. So the application itself, templates are provided. There's a brief expression of interest form which must be submitted by the 13th of November, 1 o'clock Dublin local time. And then so just to be clear, that is there's no selection at that point. Those expressions of interest do have to be eligible, and if they're not eligible, then they will be rejected. Again, that's not something we want to do. Please ensure they are eligible. If you have any doubts at all about their possible eligibility, please contact us beforehand. But once they're eligible, you'll automatically be eligible to then submit a full application. If you haven't submitted an expression of interest by the 13th of November, it will not be possible to submit a full application. So the expression of interest is mandatory. There is no selection at that point, but it is mandatory to submit it. Then the full application is due on the 10th of January at 1 o'clock Dublin local time. It consists of four parts. So part A1 is summary information on the proposal. And then part A2 is personal information. So that part A2 will not be shared with the evaluators or the review panel. It will be retained by the Research Leaders 2025 management team and is purely to determine eligibility, family status, contact details, etc. Your signature is required on that form, so you will have to print out the final page and sign it and incorporate a scanned copy of that into the final PDF that you submit. And that's to indicate that you accept the terms and conditions of the fellowship program and other aspects such as data protection and GDPR, etc. Then the main part of the application then is part B1. That's the main research proposal. It covers excellence, impact, and implementation, and there are page limits on that. And then part B2 covers CVs, ethical aspects, and letters of commitment. So I want to highlight briefly the evaluation criteria, and the full evaluation process is described in the call document. But it is worth highlighting some of these evaluation criteria. So excellence, impact, and implementation are the three main criteria. 50% of the marks are for excellence, 30% for impact, and 20% for implementation. Please note this, I suppose, in terms of how you formulate your proposal. And then if we look at excellence, so 50% of the marks are focused on this square here, this excellence. So the first criteria is quality and credibility of the research project. Then the next one is quality and appropriateness of the training and the transfer of knowledge between the applicant and host. Then quality of the supervision and the capacity of the applicant to reach or reinforce a position of professional maturity. So 50% of the marks go for excellence, and in terms of excellence, only one of four criteria is focused on the research project. Now, the research project itself really does have to be excellent, but that on its own is not sufficient. If you have a fantastic research project but have neglected the training, the two-way transfer of knowledge between the applicant and the host, or the supervision, or if it's not apparent that the applicant has a capacity to reach a position of professional maturity or independence, then the marks will not be forthcoming for excellence. So it's really important not to neglect the career development aspects and the supervisory aspects of the proposal. Um, and then the other thing to note is that this program is based heavily on the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions International Fellowships, and as are the application forms, but the application forms are not exactly the same. So the application form allows you slightly more space. With Marie Sklodowska-Curie is 10 pages, with research leaders is 15 pages, and also there are some specific differences. It may be that you've already applied to Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions earlier this year, and you would like to also apply to research leaders. In that case, that's absolutely a fine thing to do. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to accept both if both were successful, but then you'll have the option, if only one is successful, of taking that one, or if both are successful, you'll have the option of choosing which one to take. So that's all fine, but do not copy and paste the application that you submit to Marie Curie, because it will not be eligible. It needs to use the same template. It needs to answer it needs to use the research leaders template, and it needs to answer the specific research leaders questions. While some of them are the same, some of them are different. And one, just to note, that is particularly different is the contribution to the vision of the Irish agri-food sector as set out in Foodwise 2025, and or the contribution to the application of technologies highlighted in the Chagas Foresight report, both of which we mentioned earlier. To get information on the programme, go to chagas.ie/RL 2025. To download the application forms, and in particular the one that's of most interest to you right now is the expression of interest. You go to the application tab to get details on primary supervisors who are interested in hosting you. From Chagas, go to the primary supervisors tab, and for any other information that you're looking for, if you're don't be caught and wondering and not knowing how to progress, contact Research Leaders 2025 at chagas.ie, and we're more than happy to help. The call document is the central point for all information on the fellowship. Please read it in detail, and in particular, if you're new to Research Leaders and you're coming to this and looking at for the first time, go to section 2, quick advice for those interested in Research Leaders, and in that section we've tried to break it down and outline what you need to do next stepwise. So, and what I'd advise for you right now, today, this afternoon to start, 1, check if you're eligible, and then 2, find a Chagas supervisor. So you'll find, as I mentioned a minute ago, you'll find Chagas supervisors who are interested in hosting fellows listed on the Research Leaders 2025 website, with profiles and information on the areas in which they work. But if you can't find somebody there, get in contact with us and tell us your area of interest, and we will see if it's possible to link you in with somebody appropriate. Okay, so for now, I'm going to pause. I'm going to put the microphone on mute, and we're going to collate the questions, and then I come back within 5 minutes. It's 25 past 11 now. I'll be back within 5 minutes to start answering those questions. The questions here, and I just what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start on them, and as they keep coming in, we'll deal with them as they come. So if you do have questions, please send them to researchleaders2025 at chagas.ie or to the Twitter using hashtag RL2025. So one question, do I choose a topic? Yes. It's up to the fellow in combination, I would say, with the primary supervisor to choose a topic. So primarily, it's up to the fellow or up to the research applicant to choose a topic, but obviously you need to secure a primary supervisor in Chagask and an outgoing phase supervisor. So you're going to have to find a topic that's also of interest to them. So it's to kind of work in combination. But there's no topic specified by research leaders. That's totally up to you, as long as it's in the area of one of the four broad research areas of Chagask. Is the choice of primary supervisor and the outgoing supervisor limited to those on the Chagask website? No. So the primary supervisor can be any staff member of Chagask who has a contract which will extend beyond the end date of the fellowship, and the outgoing host supervisor can be any researcher from around the world. Bear in mind, so the ones that are listed on the Chagas website, they're just ones who've proactively expressed an interest to us in being a supervisor, and they've put their details up there to make it maybe a bit easier for you to find somebody. But if you find a Chagas staff member who's interested in supervising and an outgoing host supervisor outside of those, that's perfectly fine. Bear in mind that the supervisors will be submitting CVs and will be assessed as part of the application in terms of their ability to supervise you. And so I guess you should choose carefully, choose someone who will be able to act as a very good supervisor and who it will be clear to the evaluators that they are a good supervisor. Must I obtain the primary supervisor support? Yes, definitely. This is very important. So the expression of interest must be submitted by the applicant via email, and you must include the primary and outgoing host supervisor in CC on that email. And you must have a clear commitment from both that they will support your application before you submit the expression of interest. So that is extremely important. I want to know, if I still don't have contact with a host organization, how can I find one? Can a supervisor help me with this? Absolutely. So the first step would be, I would recommend anyway, would be to find a Chagas supervisor. And once you find the Chagas supervisor, between you and the Chagas supervisor, you can identify a suitable outgoing phase host supervisor. In general, the Chagas researchers have a lot of contacts all across the world, so that shouldn't be a problem. But I would advise doing that together with the Chagas supervisor, unless, of course, you already have an outgoing phase host supervisor in mind, and in that case, then you should propose it directly to your Chagas supervisor. If you're not able to find a host organization, or if you've difficulty finding a Chagas supervisor, please do get in contact with us, and we'll give us some information on your area of expertise, the area you want to conduct your research project in, and we will try and match you up with somebody. There's one very specific question here. I'm just going to deal with it in terms of eligibility in case it may also, something similar may apply to somebody else. So it says, I am Argentine and I've resided in the country, I presume that's Argentina, working in an academic public institution. I want to apply for the outgoing phase in Argentina to work in a non-academic organization. Can I submit to the program? And I would say in that case, no, and it's no for two reasons. Because if you're not a national or a long-term resident of an EU member state or associated country, then the outgoing phase has to be in an EU member state or associated country. And also, in terms of the mobility rules, the outgoing phase cannot be in a country where you spent your more than 1 year of the last 3 years. And it would appear that person would have spent probably all three of the last 3 years in Argentina, and then it wouldn't be possible to go to Argentina. So in that case, for two reasons, that would not be eligible. So I think that is the end of the questions. We have what I'm going. Okay, so back again. How many fellowships are going to be available for this call? There will be 10 fellowships available for this call, 10 fellowships that were available for the last call, and we have enough funding for 10 fellowships for this call. Is preference given to dairy-based research topics? Absolutely not. Uh, top proposals must be in any area of the four Chagas research program areas. So animal and grassland, crops, environment, land use, rural economy and development, and food, and no preferences given to any of those topic areas. So all would be considered equally. Are any food focused topics appropriate to Chagas? Yes, absolutely. Food focused topics are appropriate. I wouldn't select any in particular and say some are more appropriate than others, as long as it's within the remit of the Chagas food program. If you're able to find a researcher in the Chagas food program who's going to supervise a proposal, then you can consider that it is eligible. Um, I'm not an EU citizen and my outgoing phase is to a country in the EU, so Spain. Okay, so that first part, that is eligible, and that will require me to apply for a visa. Does that mean I'm not eligible since I'm not currently eligible to live and work in that country? No, that does not mean you're not eligible. What that means is that you should put in a little bit of research to find, are you likely to get a visa? So in that case, we would probably consider that it is eligible and go for evaluation. But if it was evaluated positively and was one of the top 10 and we offered you the fellowship, we would then look for proof that you're going to be able to work and live in Spain. And if you were refused a visa, then the fellowship would fall. So you would not be able to continue with the fellowship. So in that case, I would suggest you put some work in to find out, well, are you likely to be able to get a visa to live and work in Spain? And indeed, your outgoing phase host may be able to help in that. Can Brazil be the country chosen in the first phase? Yes, it can, but again, that depends on your nationality. So if you are a national of an EU member state or one of the associated countries for Horizon 2020, then Brazil can be the country chosen for the outgoing phase. If you're not, if you're from outside one of those countries, then you cannot choose Brazil. Again, there's another one there again regarding mobility and applying for the visa or job permit. So you don't have to prove your eligibility beforehand unless it's clear that you will not be eligible. If it is very clear that you will definitely not be eligible to live and work in that country, then the proposal will not go for evaluation. But if it's possible, if you have the right to apply for a visa and if that would be considered and there's nothing ruling you out from getting that visa, then it's fine to go for evaluation. But again, you should consider before you put all the work into writing a proposal, you should check, well, what are the chances of getting a visa to live and work in that country. It's worth noting that through your access, most European countries are quite open to giving visas to researchers. But again, you're going to need to check that out with regards to that specific country, and the outgoing phase host organization may be able to help you in that regard. If your primary supervisor has plans to retire within the 3 years of the program, does that affect their eligibility? Yes. So your primary supervisor should be there for the full duration. So we'll be looking for that information. Obviously, if something happens after people's circumstances change, if your fellowship is ongoing and your supervisor decides to retire at that stage, then we'll have to deal with that at that time and try and work through a change, figure out is a change possible or appropriate. But in terms at the application stage, your supervisor should have a contract which will be in place until the end of the fellowship, your primary supervisor. if the outgoing phase supervisor is from an academic organization, can the third supervisor be an academic from a different academic institution in a different country? Yes, um, uh, absolutely. To act as third supervisor, that is fine. Um, the two things to bear in mind from that, that doesn't talk about the secondment. So if your outgoing phase is from an academic organization, then your secondment, or in any case, a secondment cannot be to an academic organization. But if you're purely talking about a third supervisor and not a secondment supervisor, then the third supervisor can be an academic also from a different academic institution. The only thing I would say again is that's an eligibility question, but in terms of evaluation, you should ensure that it's practical to participate in the supervisory panel. So there's no problem with them being in a different country. If they're a good supervisor who will have expertise to bring to the proposal, that's excellent. But you should detail in the application how that will be managed, because obviously it's a little bit more awkward if you're bringing in a supervisor from a third country. But it certainly doesn't rule you out, or certainly it needn't count against you in the evaluation stakes, as long as you deal with it clearly and outline how that will be managed. So, if I've understood you right, at the time of delivering the expression of interest, the full proposal and supervisor's confirmation are not yet required. No, that is not correct. The full proposal is not required. All you need is like an abstract summary of the proposal, but the supervisors are required. Now, in general, we expect that the supervisors will not change between the expression of interest and full proposal. In some limited cases, it is possible that those things can change, as long as clear justification is provided. But you should, in any case, have support and clear support from the supervisors for your expression of interest, and the names of the primary and outgoing phase supervisors will be required in the application. What is the required engagement of the host? What do they have to comply for in terms of deliverables, and what can they expect to gain by supporting a fellow? So the requirements of the host are outlined in the terms and conditions of the call document. But in brief, basically, the host has to provide uh, uh, an outgoing phase host supervisor for the fellow. They have to provide infrastructure for the research. So if that's desk-based research, they have to provide desk space or an office space, and access to internet and access to necessary resources to conduct their research. If it's a laboratory-based project, they have to provide access to laboratory space and again the necessary equipment or infrastructure for the project, and that's specific to the project. So obviously we can't specify that in advance, but the evaluators will be looking at the letter of support from the host organization to determine if the appropriate level of support will be there. What can they expect to gain by supporting the fellow? So for uh, what they can expect to gain is that there'll be an experienced researcher working in their lab for 18 months, who would be that would be free to them. They working on a project that will be of interest to them. It will generate a new collaboration with Chagask. If they're a public research organisation, they will have access to the intellectual property that flows from that, and they will have a pair of hands in the laboratory to uh, be part of their team. As a UK citizen, could I choose someone here as the outgoing supervisor? So that really depends on the. It's not so much the citizenship; it is the mobility aspect. So a UK to go to the UK for the outgoing phase, you would have to show that you had not been a resident in the UK for more than 1 year out of the previous 3 years. So that's the most important aspect with that. Um, as you as the UK has been raised, I guess the we can't ignore the situation with Brexit. So unfortunately, at the moment, we don't know the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and it's really it's completely up in the air at the moment. So then it's worth drawing your attention to a number of eligibility conditions and eligibility conditions and the terms and conditions relating to participants and locations. So the definition of member state or associated country in Appendix 1 uh, states that for the purpose of the call, a country shall be defined as a member state or associated country if it is a member state or associated country at the deadline for receipt of full application. Now, as things stand, we don't know if the UK will be a member state or an associated country on the 10th of January. Um, and Clause 6 of the eligibility conditions and Clauses 9, 10, 11 of the terms and conditions contain specific requirements relating to the ability of the applicant fellow to live and work in the country of the outgoing host, and where applicable, the secondment host. Again, for this obviously wouldn't be the case for a UK citizen, but for non-UK citizens, we don't know what the position will be in terms of ability of people to live and work in the UK. We don't know what their immigration policy will be after leaving the EU. Again, in terms of eligibility at this stage, we will probably let that through if that was the only question, but it would happen at the time before the employment contract is granted that we would have to consider, is it possible for that person to live and work in the UK. And lastly, Clause 84 of the Terms and Conditions states that Teagasc reserves the right to revise the terms and conditions at any time, and in particular that can include changes that need to be made to comply with instructions from the European Commission. So Teagasc will be bound by and enforce any instructions that we receive from the European Commission because it is co-funded by the European Commission. So, yes, so I guess for the UK at the moment, unfortunately, we're not in a position to offer guarantees of how the UK will be dealt with in terms of eligibility. You can read the call document yourself, and that's principally because we do not know what the position of the UK will be at the deadline for applications. So unfortunately, I can't really give any more information on that. If there's a specific question that somebody has and you want to email it to us, we can try and answer that as best we can, and we'll do our best to do that. In terms of long-term residency of research activity, does MSc count? Example, MSc plus PhD equals 5 years in a EU country. So it's in terms of residency, long-term residency, applicants who have spent a period of full-time research activity of at least 5 consecutive years without breaks in research in one or more. So that depends on the MSc. So if it's a taught MSc with like a 6 month research aspect, that would not count as full-time research activity. If it's a full-time research master's MSc, and then that would count. So that depends on the nature of the MSc. Could you confirm that the outgoing phase can be 6 months as an academic institution in a country and 6 months in a non-academic one in a different country? Then back, no. Well, okay, so there's a question there. Could you confirm that the outgoing phase, total of which is 18 months, can be 6 months in an academic institution in a country and 6 months in a non-academic institution one in a different country? So, well, what it can be, the outgoing phase is 18 months in total. As part of that, you can choose a secondment to a non-academic organisation if the main part of the outgoing phase is to an academic organisation, and that secondment can be to a different country than the rest of the outgoing phase. It can. I would like to know if I'm eligible for this course since I obtained my PhD since 2012. So if you have a PhD, then automatically you are well, in terms of that aspect, then you're considered an experienced researcher. If you have a PhD, you're considered an experienced researcher, and to that extent you're eligible. But obviously it depends on all of the other eligibility criteria as well. What is the final product or report of the fellowship? So it's not so much about the final product or report. So there is a reporting requirement. So reporting is done every 6 months. We look for progress reports, and it's more about to use a cliche, it's more about the process than the destination, or the route rather than the destination. So there'll be ongoing progress reports as part of the fellowship, which the fellow will submit, and then also separately the supervisor will submit a separate private report to confirm if their view that it's progressing as planned. Um, so that is that. But there's detailed sections within the full application which deal with communication, dissemination aspects of the project, which we also expect fellows to engage in, and that should be so you should give some thought to that yourself and detail that as part of the application. Um, is it possible to start with 18 months in Ireland first and then 18 months elsewhere? No, the outgoing phase has to be first, and then the return phase to Ireland second. Uh, could you please explain again the function or responsibility of the secondment? The function of the secondment is really it's up to yourself. If we want to offer the possibility for experience in different research environments. So, if the outgoing phase is to an academic organization, we want to offer the possibility for someone to gain experience in a non-academic organization. So that could be industry, or that could be a non-governmental organization or similar. So that's the reason we offer it. It's a possibility. It's not mandatory. So you don't have to take a secondment. That really is if you feel it will be useful. It's also important to know that it should be clear that the secondment adds value, that it's not just there for the sake of it. So evaluators will be asked to check and to give their opinion on whether there's a clear value from the secondment. And if there's not, that will, I guess, that will weaken the proposal. So don't include a secondment just for the sake of it. If you feel that it would be very useful, and if you can describe in the proposal the value and the impact of the secondment in terms of the project and or in terms of your own career development, then that can be very positive. If not, then if you can't clearly outline the value of it, then it will probably be better not to include it, as it may weaken it. Um, um, Okay, there's only one question left. It's very specific. I'll start on it, but it may be that we have to take it away because it's very specific. It's asking about a top masters with 30 credits at an EU member states, and then start a PhD in Ireland. States 6 years in EU member states, 2 years in EU member states, and 4 years in Ireland. Wondering whether I'm eligible for long-term residence applications or applicants or not. So, to be clear about long-term residents who have spent a period of full-time research activity of at least 5 consecutive years in one or more member states. So that really, I guess we'd need more detail on that. But to be clear on masters, a taught master's is not considered full-time research activity. I mean, you may be able to look at the master's and make the case to say that there was 6 months full-time research activity or 4 months full-time research activity that would need to be backed up by by the institution where you did the master's to show exactly the amount of activity there. But in general, a taught master's does not count as full-time research activity, mainly because it's not full-time research activity. It's mainly taught elements with a proportion of research. So it's full-time research activity in one or more member states, and at least 5 years consecutive. So without breaks in research. So if you had in terms of your top masters, uh, if at any point that's not full-time, then it doesn't count. If it is a if you were if you completed all the taught elements and then went on and spent 6 months or 3 months or whatever full time on research activity, that may be counted, but it would have to be consecutive with the rest of your research activity within the EU. So look, for very specific questions, I think it's best if we take them offline. um, I have double citizenship. Can I choose where to do the outgoing part? So if you've double citizenship, then you can consider that you have citizenship of either. So then, if you've Portuguese citizenship, you can then you have Portuguese citizenship, regardless of if you also have citizenship of another country. So if you have Portuguese citizenship, you can do your outgoing part in any country, because Portugal is a member of the EU. So I think that is everything covered. Um, okay, so I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for submitting your questions. If you have other questions, please do submit them to researchleaders 2025 at chagas.ie. Please do get proactive today. Check your eligibility. If you have doubts, send us an email, and then go and find a Chagas supervisor to be your primary supervisor, and then after that, start working on an abstract of your proposal and on finding an outgoing phase supervisor. So we want to get really good at proposals. We definitely do not want to reject any of them as ineligible, and we want to get the expressions of interest in by the deadline. Please note that the expressions of interest are submitted. We'll be taking it as the date and time that we receive them. So if the deadline is 1 o'clock on the 13th of November, please don't send it at 5 to 1 on the 13th of November, because there may be delays either on your server or on our server, and we will have to go by the time we received it. So if we receive it at 5 past 1 on the 13th of November, we will not be able to accept it. So please don't leave it until very close to the deadline to submit it. We will ideally submit it the day beforehand or the evening beforehand. Um, so, okay, I think there's one more question here. Okay, who chooses a foreign organization, postdoc or supervisor? It's really it's up to either. So you should. It's really a combination. You need to work together on that. I would say if you have a good outgoing phase supervisor that you want to pick, then I talk to your primary supervisor about that, and propose that. If you're not able to find somebody, talk to your primary supervisor, and maybe one of their contacts will be appropriate. So it's really all to be chosen together. It's I guess a joint activity. I mean, if you've difficulty agreeing with your primary supervisor on who should be the outgoing phase supervisor, again, you may want to think about that, because this is someone you have to work with for the next 3 years, and that relationship between the fellow and the primary supervisor is going to be key to the success of implementing the proposal or implementing the project. I guess it's important to bear in mind it's not just about winning the application round. You also need to successfully implement the project. So there's no point in getting the fellowship and then having 3 miserable years because you don't get on with the supervisor. So I would say you should be looking for a primary supervisor where you have a good collaborative approach from the start. Uh, is the outgoing phase country part of the assessment? Is the example, is preference given to Eastern EU countries? No, there's no preference given to any country. There's As I've outlined already, there's certain eligibility requirements depending on your own citizenship or long-term residency, but outside of that, there's no preference given to any country. Of course, the outgoing phase host and supervisor will be assessed as part of the application, and it'll be assessed, are they a good host organisation? Do they have expertise to bring to it? Will they be able to give good support to the fellow while they're undertaking the research? That will certainly be assessed, but there's no preference giving a priori to any particular country. And what is the required engagement of the host? What do they have to comply for in terms of deliverables, and what can they expect to gain? Okay, I think we answered that already. Um, okay, so I think we've answered everything. I don't want to labour it too long, so I'm going to cut it there. I would emphasise again, get active today. Read the eligibility terms and conditions, and find a supervisor. And if you have any questions at all, do get on to us. Don't risk being rejected for being ineligible. Send the question to us beforehand. And for everyone who does submit an expression of interest, we will be conducting some more webinars to help you write in your proposal. So that's also, I guess, part of our commitment to you as fellows or as applicants. It's not just if you're successful, but we're also going to provide some information webinars to help you with your proposal. But that'll be after the expression of interest deadline. So yes, I leave it there. And thank you very much for joining us. And thanks very much to all the team in Chagas for working on the questions with us as well. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.